Whoopsies. Sorry about that, ladies and gents. Got carried away working on, I started poking at things before the stream, I know. Not a good habit, but I wanted to try and make sure I could get spell names kind of tied in, at least as much as possible, because I know UI cannot... It's not always the most glamorous thing in the world. It's definitely not the same as working on a shader, working on, you know, other 3D or gameplay mechanics, so I can kind of understand why it's not terribly interesting to some folks. And because of that, I try and kind of charge through as much UI as I can, because otherwise this game would be almost entirely UI, and I'd rather not put you guys through that. So where we left off yesterday, right, and I'm going to keep poking at this while I talk about this. So yesterday we had just finished charging through, let's see here, 12, sure. We had just finished charging through some of the code that ran spells. So we had the scriptable objects set up, we created a couple spells, we attached the idea of a list of spells to a caster, and also we attached the idea of mana to a caster, so that casters could then cast spells using the information they had. We're now getting to the point where we pretty much just have to figure out how we intend on going about actually having the information get communicated to the UI, so that the UI can set aside actions and information such that we can then cast spells mid-combat. And eventually we'd also like to cast certain spells outside of combat, although I'm going to need to add more fields in order for that to actually be kind of meaningful. Because as is currently, there's no way to tell the difference between a spell that is purely combat versus a spell that has utility outside of combat. So we need to add more information before we can dive into that. But that is definitely something that does need to get done. So I started in on the combat UI because we've been working a lot with combat recently, trying to get combat into a shape where not only is it interesting, but it feels like every character has a role. And that's been kind of the main focus of the last week or two. And then we're probably going to hop back purely into the adventuring and exploratory side of the game. I've been working on getting the terrain kind of up to snuff, getting models that are hopefully helpful in generating the world. We'll jump into NPCs that can sell and buy things, as well as NPCs who are purely there for conversational aspects. So we've definitely got a lot of bits and pieces coming up. Let's see here. You should actually just be transparent. So what I'm kind of tossing around is right now the idea that this should not be called a raw image. This should be excuse me. Still managed to keep a cough even after all this time. There we go. Combat spell selector. That sounds not only useful, but also like something we'd want to make use of here. So let's see here. We've got the list of spells. We now need to just append a bunch of these objects, and as we append the objects, we want to make sure that they have all the information they need so we can refer back to the spell afterwards. So let's see here. The spell picker. Oh, I know what I need to do. I probably have to attach a script to the spell selector itself. But let's actually do this one step at a time. So, the first thing is I want to actually fill in this list with things. So, there's my combat UI class. And let's just add a new template. So this is our combat spell UI template. And actually, just to keep the names matching here, come on. There we go, much better. Combat spell UI. And our combat UI wants a copy of this, just so it has some idea of what's going on. Let's see here. You say choose spell action, QRS. Okay, here it is. So we say choose the action, we set it to visible. And now we have to find a child in a long string of children. So we want the scroll view, right? Yeah, scroll view, viewport, content. Once we've got the content, this becomes a lot easier. Because then we can just start appending all of our UI objects to it, and hopefully they'll keep the form and factor that we gave them. That's at least the hope. We'll see in a moment, obviously, how well that ends up working. But, let's see. Yeah, we'll just try it. For each in the, oh crap, we have to get the choosing character. So we grab their spell list, we say, hey, for each spell in your list, we're going to go into the spell list view and just start appending things. For right now, there's only one spell in each character's list, so it's not going to be that bad, hopefully. We'll just say game object, spell, let's see, what was it, the combat spell UI, so I'll just call it spell UI. Let's see here. This is the combat spell UI template. Good. We then say spell UI dot transform dot set parent to what? To the spell list view. Hopefully that'll be enough. I really hope that'll be enough. Granted, we probably also, I'm going to put an index tracker here. And what we're going to do here is not only increment it each time we run across a spell, we're also going to say the spell UI transform position. We're just going to set the position fairly simply, just 0, and then we're going to push it downwards based on how far down in the list it should be. So, and right now we know they're 24 pixels, so I can do something like that. Granted, eventually I want to remove that and replace it with something a little more dynamic, so if I resize things, I don't have to also make a code change. It'll make life just a lot easier in general. Spell is assigned, but its value is never used. Ah, okay. Let's, since we're here, transform, find child. It has a child, I believe, just named like spell text. Yeah. Get component text equals spell dot spell name. There we go. We'll set name just so we can see it taking place at the same time. Fairly simple and easy. Hopefully it shouldn't be too much trouble. We'll see if that's the case. I've said that before, I'm certain, and had things just spiral out of control quickly, so we'll see. Oh right, I meant to walk into combat. You can attack, you can attack. You have a spell, and I'm not seeing it. If we look at the combat UI though. There is content here, but you'll note that for some reason these values are way off. Okay, so if I fix the left and right, it's actually not an issue. But if I don't fix the left and right, it becomes problematic. So at least the text is getting set right, and it is generating it as we expect it to. So that's not terrible, but we should figure out why the heck it's setting that incorrectly. The easiest thing I think we can do, since setting it normally is generating some trouble for us, we can just actually manually control a lot of the elements in here. So we can actually go into the spell UI and say transform, and then cast it out as a rectangle transform, because we know this is a piece of UI, and we know that the UI can be handled in a different way than usual. We can actually say, here's the rectangle that we're using, and that should give us a little more control. Specifically, we know X, and we know, let's see, I can just put values, right? Yeah, X, Y would be that spell index times 12, times 24, sorry, times 24 minus 12, times, there we go, that'll probably do it. So there's our X and Y. It wants our width. The width doesn't really matter, because hopefully it should get stretched to the whole thing. So I'm just going to put like 64, and we know that we also had 24 units. All these magic numbers should not be here in our final format. Oh, okay, that's read-only. That's great. Where do I actually set left and right? Oh, it looks like these are... Nope, that's a different kind of left and right. I'm going to bring up the rectangle transform real quick, just to see what the heck is in here, because I haven't messed with this a ton. So we don't care, I guess we care somewhat about size. The anchor minimum and maximum we shouldn't have to set, because the anchors aren't really being used here. Local corners, get inset. It makes me wonder if calling... Let's try something. Let's say we set this to false, so that its world position gets reset when we actually generate it, and we're not going to touch the position after that. Just kind of curious what Unity's default behavior here is. Oh, look at that. Look at that. That's interesting. I didn't have to change anything this time, and it just jumped in, did the hard work, and was done with it. Okay. Okay, I can handle this. We just now say we take the rectangle whose position we are going to just push down a little bit, right? So we're going to grab the position. We're going to say your position at Y is actually going to be equal to minus 12 minus the spell index times 24. And then we just have to set that back in. Spell UI, rectangle, position is POS. Great. Great, great, great. Hopefully that should take care of it when we have multiple spells. I'm actually going to go so far as to take our cleric. Where are you, cleric? And we're going to just slap a second spell in to make sure that it's working as intended. If not, obviously we need to rethink how some of our sizing works. It's not the end of the world, but it's just kind of a pain in the butt to have it not quite work right. And then we actually have to do the filtering eventually, so that as... Okay, so now you'll notice, despite having 2 spells in their inventory... Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Why are these down so far? They worked. It definitely worked. It just, it just is really far down. Hobbly saying that one of his least favorite parts relating to games is hooking up the UI and extracting information from it. It definitely can be sometimes. I know that there is... Why is that so far down? There sometimes can be a lot of work to transfer the information into the UI and then to architect it correctly so you can easily get that information out while still making sure that you're like not going overkill on the architecture, or that you're not doing things in such a bizarre way that you end up with your architecture kind of being all over the place. Okay. Wait, look at that. The spell text is at the correct position. It's actually at a interesting position. But the actual spell UI... Where the heck's the spell UI? Oh, whoops. I need to make it unalphaed, huh? No, it's in the right spot. It's all in the right place. It just... It's acting very strangely. That is too funny. It makes me wonder if it's automatically spacing things inside of it. If it is, that's fantastic. I don't even have to, like, bother with this crap. I have a feeling it's not, just because that's, like... That feels like Unity doing too much, almost. It would be getting... Yeah, okay, they are right on top of each other right now. Okay, why don't we try this? Instead of... Let's try a local position change. And I'm just going to be really lazy about this, because... I want to make sure that this works. There we go. The incredibly lazy way of handling it, but that's okay. Because we're just testing this sucker out. I think I went the wrong direction with that. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I always like to have my math be nice and clean like that, even if it's not the most, like, I don't know. It's not the most compact way of doing it, and yet, there we go. Okay, perfect. Now, we've got the information finding its way in. We now need to be able to interact with it. This is why you guys can see I've already spent 20 minutes on this, and I've only got some text, some extra text displaying that I didn't have before. Not the sexiest thing to work on when it comes to games, but at the same time, good UI is a difficult thing. It's one of those things where if you do your job right, nobody will notice and nobody will think about it. They'll simply use your UI without having to, like, puzzle through it or get lost in it. If you do it wrong, it becomes a major contention point. So you have to make sure anytime you add UI to your game that it makes sense. Otherwise, you end up with a lot of pieces of the puzzle that kind of start to fall apart very quickly. So let's see. Here's our spell. Yeah, here's our spell UI. I'm gonna tack a quick, not a quick. I'm gonna tack a new script onto here. And this will be our. Let's see. I have a combat. I just want to make sure I've got this correct. I've got a combat item UI, so I want a combat spell UI script. Yes, I know. I have to do this every time. Okay, so combat spell UI has a couple things. One, it has our spell, probably. I actually don't know if I need to record the spell or not quite yet. I'll leave that out, if only because I just want the interactions in here. So, specifically the oh crap, it was Unity Engine.Event Systems. And I believe it's the pointer, yeah, click handler. So when you click it, I want to essentially say, I need to know the name of the actual function. But when you click on it, I want to select the spell, and then let you select a level eventually. For now, I don't know if I'm going to go into levels, but there it is, on pointer click. But for now, we're going to do the simple route of at least making it, obviously you have to be able to pick your spell. So when you click on it, we know all of these have so we know they all have attached to themselves a raw image, which is part of Unity Engine.UI. And we know that the color of that image, we can just reset it pretty much. I'm actually thinking that maybe I should be putting this somewhere else, this click. Let's pull up the combat UI real quick. Because this is one of those things that if I do it incorrectly, it's going to be really painful later to add more to it. So I want to make sure I get this right. The upside is it's a nice little encapsulated component. So even if I completely muss this up, it's not too hard to kind of relegate everything inside of it to its own little container and keep the messiness that's inside it self-contained. So in a worst case, we don't get caught with this this kind of setup where the bad architecture from one part of our code starts to kind of spread and make the rest of our code worse. Let's see. So I'm only curious about what the on value changed is of the scroll rectangle, or the scroll view. That's what it's called. Oh, okay, that's talking about when you slide the slider up and down. I don't really care about that a ton. Yeah, I definitely don't. Viewport, mask, okay. These things are pretty simple, luckily. So when you click on one of the items, we turn on the background, and we also probably want some kind of, gosh, I'm just out of space. Like, there's literally no more room for things in this UI. I've already got the cancel button kind of hanging off the edge. You click one of these, it brings up the list of spells. I decide I want to choose a different spell, so I click a different one. Different spells come up. So I need both of these in there at the same time. When I click a spell, I should have another button arrive that is our, like, confirm button to essentially set the action into place and let it all run. I'm just going to make a copy of our cancel button. And I'm going to shift it down. Okay, maybe not down that much, though. Sure. For now, that might be fine. There we go. So we have a cast spell button. We've got the items. We just have to make sure the selection happens now. That's really the only piece that's left, is to make sure that the scroll view handles two things. It handles objects inside of it being clicked on, and it also needs to handle, as the objects are clicked, we deselect the other ones. That's kind of the two parts here. And then we should pretty much be finished with this piece of UI. So I'm just for now going to set the color to a white background. Maybe not blaringly white. Oh, right. These are floats, so it's between 0 and 1. You always have to remember, if they're using floats, everyone tends to do colors in a 0 to 1 range, because floats have quite an amount of variance between their values, versus if it says ints or byte, then you know that your color is going to be 0 to 255. It's just kind of a given rule for the most part. On pointer click. Great. So when I click on 1, that happens. So the only part that kills is that it's going to be difficult. Actually, no, it's not. I lied. You click on a combat spell UI, of which I'm going to attach this script. You click on it, and then what it should do is it should step up and tell everyone who isn't itself, by the way, you should be off. So let's go to transform.parent.get components in children. And the component is going to be the combat spell UI. For each combat spell UI in this mess. And that's actually not what I want to do. We know raw images are attached to all of these, so really, is there no transparent? Okay, well, 0, 0, 0, 0. Ta-da! And then we set our own color to non-zero. That should make this pretty friggin' simple. It really should. I can't think of many ways to make this easier for us. We do also have to tie in the submit button, obviously. So let's get that out of the way while we're kind of digging around in here. And you'll note I'm keeping my functions kind of grouped together. That's just good design. When you're sitting here coding, you can do two things to keep your code in place. If you're like me, I tend to do, if I have nothing else to sort my code by, I will sort it by just alphabetically, right? So you've got the basic in-class public. For me, I have Unity calls in here, but you may or may not have those if you're not working with Unity. And then I have my helper functions at the bottom. Inside of those categories, I tend to do some kind of either relevant grouping. So if these functions are all relevant to each other, I'll keep them next to each other, the same way I do for this. And then the other thing you'll find is that I also tend to go alphabetically if I have nothing else to go off of. But that's not always the case. That's not always what I have to work with. So sometimes there's more to it than that. Let's see, the spell picker. We have to go, okay, scroll view, viewport, content. There's a lot there, but just because we're taking a couple steps through the hierarchy, it's not that bad because we have a decent starting point. And the decent starting point stops us from looking all over the place for this thing. It actually limits us to only about a dozen objects we're searching through, which is fairly quick in comparison to a lot of the other things we could be doing. Is there like, okay, there's a detach children, but I want a destroy children. I guess I just have to for each through it. For each child in this, I'm not even going to do that. We're just going to say destroy child.gameObject. I'm just making sure that it's clear inside of the picker transform. There we go. So this essentially allows us to delete all the spells out of the UI. Otherwise, the spells will just persist throughout the rest of that combat, and we'll keep just adding more things to it, and it'll get kind of messy and not what we want. Once again, we have to kind of reset ourselves after each time we do this, because we want to make sure that our characters aren't persisting things across parts of the UI. So if, you know, a mage takes a turn, the rogue next should not have the ability to pick a spell that is out of the previous mage's inventory of spells. That's just not how this works. So we got to make sure that that doesn't happen. Also, when we're submitting a spell, we need the combat action attached to it. Or not the combat action, but the player combat action to actually record, okay, what's the spell? What level are you casting it at? Who is your target? That kind of stuff. Player rest action. Okay. Class players. Wow, I can't spell. I can never spell. I always say that, and it's funny. I just type so quickly that I make typing errors fairly commonly. And this will be the actual bit of code that gets run to process the spell being cast. So we can then say, okay, look, you know, we know your spell is this. So we're going to go into the spell, we're going to call the function, we're going to get it started. We also have the player character owner who's casting it. We have the target. All the information should be encapsulated in this spell action. So this should be able to kind of handle the brunt work of it by the time we're done. Obviously right now it's just an empty thing that needs implementation, but we'll get back to it. Gosh, today's going way too quick. I keep glancing down at my timer. It's like, it's been 40 minutes already. I really wish it hadn't been 40 minutes already. I want to go a little slower, and honestly, I'm kind of tempted to switch back from morning to afternoon streams, if only so that, A, more people can join me, and also so that I have a little more time if I go over, especially on a topic such as this, where it's like, I don't need a ton of extra time. I just need like 20 or 30 minutes extra to blast through the rest of this. I'm going to leave this, actually, I'm not going to leave it blank. I'm just going to say that needs to go there. We need to make sure that this gets updated to our submit spell action. Trying to think of anything else before I set it back to how it should be by default, and then hitting apply. I really wish it also gave some confirmation when you hit the apply button. Sometimes it just doesn't feel like there's any user reaction. So okay, there's, look at that. Okay, we can select our spell. Cast is off the screen, that's not too great. I do want to bring that back up. The whole UI honestly could go up a little bit, but that's something for another time. So I hit cast on Firebolt. The mage has a Firebolt spell only. Great, I hit cast there. Now on their turn, they're actually not going to do anything still. It recorded Jack Diddley. So we need to take care of that. Also, I'm noticing it's pretty dark. If you look at this fight, there's not a ton of light coming through. And part of that is the time of day, right? If we grab our directional light and crank the time of day to earlier, or sorry, to later in the day, now it looks a fair bit better. But this is still actually a little difficult. There's not a ton of contrast. The reason it's easy to see is because there's movement more than anything else. So I'm kind of curious if maybe I should crank up my ambient lights a little bit. Because okay, only when we hit like the 10 o'clock point does it really become obvious like what these monsters are and what they're doing. And then the moment the sun goes down, that's actually kind of funny. I need to handle evening time fights a little better, but obviously some of the information is still getting, some of the light is still casting upwards and through the ground into our trees on that. I'm going to start much further into the day, just for my ease of use. Obviously, eventually we'll want this to be pretty obvious to the player what time of day it is, but for now, I just need to be able to see things. Also, is it just me, or are they always starting? Okay, no, there's an offset there. The offset's just difficult to see. So, submitting a spell action. This is kind of the... I'll call it the hard part, even though it really isn't. So, we're going to look through, before we destroy every single child in this, I'm just going to put a cleanup marker here, just so I know what's happening under that code. Even though it's pretty obvious what's happening, just in case. Always good to have just in case comments. I'm happier having at least little comments here and there that define a clump of code than I am nothing, and to glance at this later and be like, what the hell was I doing? What's going on where? So we need to do actually something very similar to this. So why don't we... yeah, I'm kind of tempted to just grab a copy of all the current children inside of this. Or I can for each through it again. I honestly don't care. We're going to say if the children here are going to be this combat UI, or combat spell UI. So we know it has a raw image. So get component, raw image, and if the color, let's say if the alpha is not equal to 0, this is the spell we need to do. So we could grab spell name out of this if we really, really wanted to. We could. It's also not difficult for us to grab the owner, because owner hasn't really changed. So we have owner, we have the spell being cast by name. We could go so far as to actually have a copy of the spell in here that is being cast. That might not be the worst thing ever. Where do I set these up? Here, let's do this inside. Inside here. And then we'll just set the spell outside of it. So we know the spell UI has a component that is named combat spell UI, and we know the spell is going to be equal to, and we're just going to pass another reference to that spell. Not the end of the world, because we're deleting it and cleaning it all up later, so it doesn't really matter a ton. And I'm just cleaning up this local position stuff. Mostly just for the sake of ensuring that we're not doing a ton of data copies for no reason. And that kind of gets its own section. I'm actually going to leave that with all the rectangle transform stuff. So we generate the new spell UI, we attach the information to it, and then we set its place inside the transforms. That all looks good. Okay, so we've got some work to do in here, and then we're pretty much done, right? We can hop in and say, here's our action for this character. Wherever I set those, here's our action list for the choice owner. And it's going to be a new player spell action. And the player spell action, for now, we're just going to go with the spell child get component, but later on we're going to want more information to exist inside of here. For example, we'll need to make sure that if you have a target to pick, that we have to pick that target. So that technically should come here after we've submitted the spell, or maybe even after we click the spell, it should immediately say choose the spell's target. Just spell cast this on this person. I'm trying to think of like a better way to handle this. Because there's just a lot of steps, and I want to make sure that each step follows almost naturally through the code. From the moment you say choose to the moment you say submit, because submit's kind of our final, okay, we're done. That's it, no more. Because we advance to the next character, so we need to make sure that there isn't actually any more after it. Let's see here. Player spell action. Spell. Yeah. For now, I'm going to keep a copy of the spell, if only because I have no other way of knowing exactly what the character does. It's also fairly simple for us to grab the text and at least say something about it, even though nothing is happening quite yet. Character name casts spell name. Gosh, we're so close. We are so incredibly close. Character casts spell, wait 2 seconds, and then done, which obviously isn't complete. We need to, at least for damage spells, we need to do all the dice rolling and take care of that. The hard part here is taking care of all the other effects going on, right? Spells can cause effects, they can cure effects, they can be cast on party members or on enemies. They have this wide array of things they could do. So unlike a weapon, which is always pretty much dedicatedly pointed at someone else, spells can be pointed in a bunch of different places. And so we want to make sure that the spell always heads towards the direction that we expect it to. And that's kind of difficult, because that means it has to be incredibly flexible. Incredibly flexible. Let's see. How do we do this? I guess I could go through the spell itself, right? The spell right now is little more than just this like garble of information. We could go so far as to say, put some functionality inside spell, and then say, on combat cast, here's how it's going to work. On standard cast, here's how it's going to work. That could be one way to do it. Let's see. Let's try this. So we have... I need one of my separators. Oop, I'm not going to find them in there, though. There we are. Also, I can't help but note that... let's get this UI function to the top. And then let's grab this... Put that there, just for sanity's sake. I'm probably going to come back later and work on this and add more to it later. And I definitely am going to need those markers if I'm going to remember after an 8-hour workday just what I was up to this morning. I could probably close that for now. I'll think about it. Also, some of this is, we're trying to keep in mind what is essentially UI optimization. It's not the same as a performance optimization. It's actually, how can I minimize the number of clicks for the player to say the same amount of information? So if I don't want them to have to click through 8 or 10 different things to cast a spell, I probably only want it to be like 2 or 3 clicks at most if I can help it. And so I want to make sure that this is clean and one kind of solid flow through the UI. Otherwise, casting spells will be like this weird break in the logic where you quickly are attacking and dodging and all the other interesting things, and then you hit spell and it comes to a screeching halt as you're like, that domain, that spell, that target, that, and like that would be great, right? You click domain, you click spell, you click target, it's cast. That's it. There's no submit button. Like, that would be perfect. That'd be, honestly, probably the best way to handle this. So, let's see here. Cast spell. A list of targets is probably best because we can always just create a list of one if it is a single target spell. So I'll probably have a character array be the, is that really going to be the way this works? Probably not. There we go. And actually, we can always pass it multiple targets separately. So maybe I'll try a single target at a time, and I need Unity's UI stuff. There we go. So I would say cast this spell on, I don't really have a target, right? Target's the hard part right now. Why don't they cast it on themselves, just for testing purposes? And then in terms of the text object, here's the text UI. Probably something like this that I need to handle this. Now, a spell action is not a kind of thing, so we can't really start this coroutine, at least not as is. I know there's a way to do this without actually calling start coroutine. I just have to remember it. Let's see, it's while Cast spell. I really would love to just be like this. Or something similar. Here's our start coroutine. And we're going to take care of this. Okay, why don't we just use the character to start the coroutine? Right, I can do that. Apparently not. Interesting. So because character, which I thought, yeah, character is a mono behavior. I'm kind of amazed that it isn't letting me. Let's try the combat UI then. There we go. There's a start coroutine I can make use of. And we're just going to say yield return this statement. Okay, so we're going to say I need the caster too. Character caster. And this should actually be a player character. Caster dot character name casts spell name. Great. Okay, so we've got this at least started, hopefully, such that we can. I'll just put the character in twice because he's his own target most of the time, even though they'll be doing silly things right now, like casting a firebolt on themselves. It's a start, right? We haven't done target picking. We'll probably get to that tomorrow, because honestly, I'm unfortunately running out of time. As much as I would love to continue going and burn through this entire thing today, I don't have the time. So that's probably going to be a bit of tomorrow at least. Or maybe I'll just finish this crud tonight, because honestly, like I said, UI, not terribly sexy. Getting this all in place is... I might be able to burn through this tonight, and tomorrow we could do something a little more interesting. I know I've got a ton of stuff on my list that just has to happen eventually. Specifically, I need to start building the initial town that the players walk into, right? I've got this kind of path to nowhere. I'm also playing with the instancing on the trees. It's hard to see, but even with a decent number of trees, right? This isn't a ton, but it's decent. It doesn't look too bad, and I'm still sitting at easily above 60 frames. And the big thing I want to do here is dump a bunch more into the scene, and then proceed to have... I need some kind of skybox. You can note that the infinite skybox that Unity provides isn't cutting it anymore. I need a skybox that has both not only the sky information in it, but also real background of some kind to better hide the fact that my ground doesn't actually look like this a ton, right? You'll note the gray is a very obvious cut line between my stuff and its. And I know I can jump in and say, in terms of skybox lighting, I'm pretty sure I can set the ground color. Not the point. It's just the skybox as is not really cutting it. And so I need to kind of take care and see what I can add to it to make this more interesting and make it look a little better as well. Because the default looks nice, but it's not great. Also, I love how the entire bush is shaking here. I might unapply that from that bush. It looks good on the trees, especially when you've got a bunch of trees moving ever so slightly. That looks nice. But I don't know if I want that applied to all of these objects, because like the bush looks okay. You'll note there's actually some grass on the ground here underneath the mage portrait. It's actually difficult to get. There we go. That looks fine not moving, right? So we don't need this stuff to be going all the time. It's just kind of overkill. Oh, always more work to be done. Always more. That's the great part about this. The moment the work is done, well, I'm probably done too. And then I have a game that I can play, and that's awesome. So, things on the list, right? Because we've got... We did some spell stuff yesterday, right? We got mana tacked in, we got some basic casting put together so that people could own spells. Today we got some more UI put together, so when you get into a fight, it's a little easier to cast those spells. So right now these don't really do anything, but you can still pick a spell and say, aha, I'm going to cast a firebolt. And the mage is also going to cast a firebolt, and that's great. Having that kind of control over things is fantastic. And it even says they do things. They don't actually do things, but it says they do, which is great. So we're pretty much on the cusp of having spells working. Alright, well, thank you guys for joining me. It has been a pleasure working through a lot more stuff. Hopefully I will be back, well, not hopefully, I will be back tomorrow morning, same time, same place. I may or may not have the spell UI worked through or not. I'm not quite sure yet, but I do appreciate you guys coming around, hanging out, chatting with me while I'm here working on things. Definitely helpful to have you folks around, so thank you for joining me. If you're here for the first time or haven't seen this before, I'm working on a first-person dungeon crawler, kind of the old school, your party members somehow march in some perfect unison on a grid, and the whole point of this for now is simply just to make something fun and interesting, and kind of has some of those like old school attachments to it still. So that's really what I'm aiming for right now. So if you like that kind of stuff, or you like watching those get made, hit the follow button below, and you'll get to see kind of the entire process from end to end, because I'm pretty early on. I think I've only been at this for 26 days now, and when I say a day, I only work on it for about an hour or so per day. It's only on the weekends that I tend to put in a lot of time on this, so that's really only about 50 hours of work. So we're still very early in on the process. If you've missed any of the videos, the YouTube link below has most of them. It doesn't have yesterday's 2 halves. I haven't stitched those together. I will get that done today though, and I'll put up yesterday's and today's, and you can kind of see the whole process as things come together. Granted, it's 30 hours of video, but if you're into game design, hey, hopefully this is something that you find interesting. Alright guys, thanks for joining me. Have a good day. Take care.